Allen Lund Company looks forward to seeing you at Matt's in March.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Redding.
Autonomous technology company Aurora plans to begin deploying driverless trucks in Texas next month. It raises several questions about the path forward for autonomous trucks. Mark Schremer of Landline Magazine joins us to answer some of those. Recent research into self-driving vehicles is showing that they should be put in park. Landline Magazine's Tyson Fisher talks with Missy Cummings, a university professor who looked into the topic and the uncertainty that surrounds it. And finally, while electric trucks aren't mainstream yet, there's a scenario in which they are sooner rather than later. So how will a new drive system affect your tire selection process and performance expectations? Andy McCulloch of Michelin provides some answers. And now, here's Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. We've got some new developments on the autonomous trucking front as one company ramps up its deployment. Mark Schremer has been covering this story for Landline Magazine, and he joins us now with the details. Mark, good to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Scott.
We've got more than a few threads to follow here, but the principal player in this conversation is Aurora Operations. They're the autonomous tech company that you may have heard of before. It plans to deploy driverless trucks in Texas starting next month, and parallel to that, the company had asked FMCSA for an exemption. It was denied. I think that's probably a good place to start as a ramp for this conversation because we've got a lot of things to cover here. But that exemption request.
Yeah, and like you said, it all kind of hinges on this idea that they're supposed to deploy driverless trucks just next month here in April. And earlier this year, they have an exemption request from a regulation that requires drivers of the stopped commercial motor vehicle, and that's the way it is worded, that driver, if they are stopped on a shoulder or some sort of emergency situation, that within 10 minutes, that driver is supposed to get out of the truck and place warning triangles in, and depending on where they're stopped and how they're stopped in different locations. And so obviously this requires a human to do it. They asked to get an exemption from that regulation so that they could deploy, and they were going to use technology to create the warning system. FMCSA denied that exemption request, and now we have Aurora that is saying we're still going to follow. So there's two things going on. One, they're suing FMCSA over denying that exemption. That is going to take a little while to play out in the courts. Meanwhile, they're still planning on deploying in April. They say that they are going to follow all existing regulations, but do not explain how they're going to follow a regulation without a human when it appears that a human is required to follow the regulation. So I'm not for sure what their plan is, and they're saying that they will release that at a later time.
Right, which begs a lot of questions. As you pointed out, I think the big one is how are they going to comply with that regulation if there is not a human on board? And to be clear, we're talking fully autonomous. We're not talking about a human, in the cab, in the passenger
and they have
seat.
been, and they've had a pilot program where they've been doing that, where they call it like a safety driver, or something. Like
operator,
it's not not somebody that's actually driving the vehicle, but they're there in case something happens. That's the way they've been doing it. In April, they are supposed to. It's supposed to be fully autonomous. It's supposed to be an empty rig. Is kind of the idea. So. If they say they're still going to comply, the only way that I could see them complying would be still having a human on board, because the way I look at it, even because another thing that I've thought about was, okay, would they just for these early deployment, would they, as this plays out in the court, would they just have a car following behind of doing that? But if you read, the regulation, it says the driver of the stopped commercial motor vehicle. So I would think that if they were going to do that, they would have to ask for an exemption from that because that's technically not the reg.
Right. Yeah.
Now, they might get that one if that's what they were to do, but I would think that they would need to go through that process and at least ask for it. So, I guess your guess is as good as mine as far as how they plan on complying with this.
Whatever happens with this, and we'll, of course, continue to monitor what happens there, but it raises all sorts of questions, and these questions have been raised before, but just basic questions about the deployment of autonomous trucks and the regulations that are on the books right now. There are so many regulations that are going to have to be skirted or rewritten or amended or
just created. I mean,
right. Yeah. And we don't know. We don't know how it's all going to play out. I think this is one of these issues too that I'm curious because I haven't seen a lot of attention on the federal level about this. Obviously, we have this story and we see these things from time to time with exemption requests, but the attention from FMCSA on this particular issue and those questions that we don't have answered right now are lingering, and they're going to have to be answered pretty quickly here.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. So I know we talk about it all the time, but it's administration change too. And so, maybe if Biden's administration seemed to be pointed one direction, we don't know exactly how this new administration and Secretary Duffy at Transportation is going to look at it. But so far at the confirmation hearings, you have seen this new administration kind of talk positively about wanting innovation and all of that. So it seems like that they may be a little more willing to kind of, give these autonomous companies a chance to succeed. But there's so many things. There's privacy issues, there's cybersecurity concerns, and just the general safety. It's an 80,000-pound truck and no human on board. Who's going to feel comfortable with that? I mean, I know I'm not, and I think there was recently a AAA survey that only 13% of the public say that they trust driverless cars or trucks right now.
Yeah. I am in the majority on that one, as you are as well. One more thing before we let you go here, FMCSA broker transparency. That comment period recently reopened, is coming to an end soon. Now is the time to get feedback in. Yeah,
so there was initially a 60-day comment period. We got nearly 5,000 comments on that. A lot of them as truckers, OIDA, very supportive of broker transparency, strengthening those existing regulations. It reopened for 30 days. We've got additional about 1,200 comments already. That goes through March 20th, next Thursday. So if you haven't already commented, the time to do that is now.
Fightingfortruckers.com. They've got a link there, I believe, to file those comments. So check it out. Mark Schirmer of Landline Magazine, everybody. We appreciate it as always.
Yeah, thank you.
And that's Landline Now News for today. Mark Rettig, back to you.
Thanks, Scott. 2 years ago, truckers lined up rigs in Washington, D.C., demanding broker transparency. Now, FMCSA is proposing a rule to fix some of the problem. You can file comments at fightingfortruckers.com, and we'll have a direct link on our website, landlinenow.com. Starting Saturday, Marty Ellis and OOIDA's tour truck, The Spirit of the American Trucker, will be at the TA in Antioch, Tennessee. That's located at Exit 62 on Interstate 24. Stop in, say hi to Marty, and join OOIDA for a $10 discount. Next, Tyson Fisher talks with Professor Missy Cummings about self-driving vehicles. I'm Mark Rettig, and this is Landline Now.
Protect your diesel engine with Howe's Diesel Defender. Restore vital lubricity, eliminate injector deposits, and boost fuel economy by 5% or more. Power, performance, protection, all in one. Howe's Diesel Defender, available now.
Firestone's FD694 drive tire for long haul and regional applications now delivers 126,000 more removal miles than the Yokohama TY517 MC2. Contact your Firestone commercial dealer to learn more.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
Landline Now, welcome back. A new study suggests that self-driving vehicles are not ready to share the roads with humans. Landline Magazine's Tyson Fisher recently spoke with George Mason University professor Missy Cummings about her latest research into the topic.
Perhaps the biggest topic in transportation in the past several years has been autonomous vehicles, especially truly driverless vehicles. Some self-driving passenger vehicle operations have been underway for a few years now, and driverless trucks are expected to hit Texas highways here pretty soon, actually. So although autonomous vehicle technology has advanced significantly over the past several years, there's at least one study that suggests that maybe it's not quite ready for prime time. So with me to talk about that study is Dr. Missy Cummings, who is a professor at George Mason University. She was also one of the first American female fighter pilots and previously served as senior advisor to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. So thank you for joining me, Dr. Cummings.
So great to be here.
So, yeah, a lot of surveys continue to kind of reveal that, most U.S. motorists maybe not too trusting of self-driving vehicles. And as your study points out, we keep hearing reports on crashes and federal investigations and stuff like that. So from what I understand, you kind of wanted to know, what was going on with these vehicles. So kind of walk me through, what you looked at and, some of the key results that you found.
Well, my research was a direct byproduct of the standing general order. So there is currently an order, we're not sure how long it's going to be there, that companies with any kind of either driving assist or self-driving car, if they get involved in a crash that meets specific criteria, like the airbag is deployed, for example, then they have to report this crash to the federal government. And then that data is archived. And then that allowed me, in conjunction with similar data that's reported to the state of California, to really start looking at what is going on with these crashes. You will hear a lot of hubbub from Waymo, for example, trying to claim that their vehicles are safer than human drivers. These analyses are just not legitimate because the self-driving cars have not generated enough miles to be directly compared to human drivers. So I wanted to go beyond are self-driving cars safer than humans, because I just don't really think this is a very productive discussion to have. What I wanted to look at then went beyond that to say, well, what are the nature of these crashes? What can we learn about how and why certain kinds of crashes are happening? And is there something else we being the people in academia, for example, is there something else we need to be doing to help these cars become more safe?
Sure. And I want to get into some of the specifics on the crashes, but I want to first go over some of the general findings here. So to me, one of the most striking findings is the non-fatal crash rates. And so, and stop me at any time I get something wrong here. But from what I gleaned from your study is that, so for human drivers, for example, there are about 200 non-fatal crashes per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. And you looked at 3 self-driving vehicle companies, and it looks like the rate for those companies are in the thousands the thousands of crashes per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. So it appears that self-driving vehicles are far less safer than human drivers, as you pointed out, but you've somehow been able to quantify that. So when it comes to that crash rate, what is it that you found? And is that something, what can we extrapolate from that data?
Well, I mean, just as I said before, the crash rates are still extremely preliminary because the car companies have just not generated enough miles to even get into the, I mean, human drivers annually generate more than 1 trillion miles. The self-driving cars are just generating millions of miles. So it's really an unfair comparison. And this is where, Waymo isn't very happy with me, but I like to point this out, is that, look, you just can't make a direct comparison right now because it's an unfair comparison to humans. When you do make that comparison, and what you can see in this paper is that I look at the data over a 2-year period. The data, particularly for companies like Amazon and Cruise, which is no longer in operation, wildly fluctuates. And these kind of wild fluctuations are a significant byproduct of the nascent nature of these operations. Waymo has consistently more miles. I think the best, if we're giving Waymo a huge benefit of the doubt, I would be comfortable saying at best they are on par with rideshare drivers, which is about 4 to 6 times more dangerous than your average driver, which that kind of result is actually, it should make people pause. What is going on with these rideshare drivers? Why are rideshare drivers,
right,
et cetera? Like, why are they so dangerous? And it really is caused by the fact that they're being forced to look at their phones. But I mean, that's if I'm being extra kind and extra generous, giving Waymo every single benefit of the doubt. But that's why in that paper, I went further to say, okay, well, the crash rates are still not scientifically valid. So what can we look at when we look at the nature of the crash? And I'll tell you what really concerns me, and especially related to trucks, is the fact that we can start to see a very dangerous pattern of what we would call phantom braking. This is where the autonomy on board, the truck, car, whatever, sees something that isn't there and does a hard braking maneuver. We can see it in the data that it's causing collisions, rear-end collisions, 2 times more often than what happens for your average human driver. And for human drivers, our rear-end collisions are actually generally at very slow speeds. But this is a big deal for trucks, because if a semi-tractor trailer hits an emergency braking maneuver on a highway because it saw something that wasn't there, I come from a long line of truckers. That truck is going to jackknife. There's going to be carnage on the road. And so for trucks, the ramifications of the phantom braking events are far more dire than I think for your average passenger vehicle.
For sure. Yeah. And that's actually one of the things I wanted to bring up, because you found that there's several different type of crash events that you were able to recognize here. The most common one being struck from behind, as you pointed out, probably the likely culprit there being phantom braking. But the question to you is, like, isn't that technology pretty much already available though, with in the form of automatic emergency braking system? Like, to the best of your knowledge, is that technology very similar to the technology being used in these self-driving vehicles? And should we be concerned with the currently available automatic emergency braking systems if phantom braking is an issue with these self-driving vehicles?
Well, it's complicated because, as with any technology that uses computer vision, there can be some similarities. And I make that distinction because for AEB, there are basically 2 kinds of AEBs: those that rely on radar and those that rely on computer vision. And there's possibly a third where there's some kind of combination of the 2. Radar is a sensor signal that we're quite mature on detecting, right? We know how to detect a radar signal. We know what that looks like, and we know what causes false radar detections. That is why radar at these close ranges, AEB is really only supposed to work within, a couple of car lengths, for example, of your car. So that helps radar from having these false positives. Unfortunately, computer vision the stereoscopic computer vision is extremely error prone. And indeed, this is actually something that's being debated about new AEB rules that are being proposed by NHTSA. It's not clear that any AEB system that is proposed can meet the strenuous testing criteria because it is so error prone. So, you kind of actually stumbled into a very other hot topic, which is what is going on with AEB and computer vision. Me personally, I don't think we should be putting those on cars. I think at best you should have a combination, but computer vision is really problematic. So those same problems in AEB only get multiplied more when you use them for a primary sensor system, because now you're not just looking at a couple of car links in front of you, you're looking way out in front of you. And this is,
Sure.
and we see it over and over again. It is indeed my theory that this is one of the reasons that you don't see Waymos going at on highway speeds. And also the reason that Aurora, the self-driving trucking company, has not yet had any successful deployments, because the computer vision hallucination problem, which is what it is simply unsolved.
Sure. And kind of jumping ahead here, but since you brought it up with the driverless trucks and with Aurora, they're expected to put their trucks out on the, public roadways, like next month is what they said. I mean, based on everything that do you think that might be a little premature? I mean, should we be worried about that?
Yeah. I have yet to see any quantitative evidence that any vehicle can either predict or mitigate the risk of hallucination. So I don't see anyone able to do it. The reason that it's been okay for Waymo, and I kind of underline okay, because when cars are moving at slow speeds, less than 45 miles per hour, for example, a phantom braking event is uncomfortable, but will not cause massive carnage on the road. That being said, we are seeing these cars getting rear-ended at twice the rate that a normal human-driven car would be rear-ended. So, I mean, there is at least an insurance discussion that we should be having, or that their Waymos, if they're self-insured, they should be thinking about, like, how much money are we spending on being rear-ended? And the problem is because, in the way that our liability is set up in this country, we say, oh, well, if you're rear-ended, it's the person behind you's fault. And so Waymo's been kind of hiding behind that umbrella for a little while. But the reality is, and I've seen several videos where even humans who are following at a 2-second or more greater braking distance, self-driving cars can actuate much harder and much faster than humans can. So even if you're a good driver and you're trying to put enough room between you and the car in front of you, it's not clear that that's actually enough room. Indeed, one action that I tell people who are driving around self-driving cars is don't get behind them. Try, really at any distance, but try to get around them or go a different way, because these phantom braking maneuvers are serious. But again, slow speed, so damage has been contained. This is just simply not going to be able to be contained at high speeds with a big truck.
You're listening to Landline Magazine's Tyson Fisher talking to Missy Cummings, a professor at George Mason University, about a study into self-driving vehicles. We've got to take a short break, but we'll be back with more after this.
Dispatch, I picked up that load of steel, so I'm ready to roll.
Sounds good. Remember, we're getting paid by weight, so make sure to use a cat scale.
I wouldn't weigh anywhere else.
Forget miss accuracy when you check on a cat scale.
Penske is the trusted source for quality used trucks. Whether you search our website, call our sales staff, or bid at our online auction, you are sure to find the right used truck for your business. Visit PenskeUsedTrucks.com to view our inventory and learn more.
Welcome back. You're listening to an interview Landline Magazine's Tyson Fisher did with a university professor on self-driving vehicles and a recent study that suggests they're not ready for prime time.
One thing I want to go back to your study real quick. You talked about the being struck from behind and a phantom braking, but another issue that you found as far as the occurrence of crashes was brought on by what you called unexpected actions by others. And the example that you used was how, oftentimes a tractor trailer will start to back up in order to make a tight right turn. And us human drivers kind of, we have understood that to mean, okay, I'll go ahead and back up, technically they're not supposed to do that, but us human drivers, we're like, no, we're fine with it. That's what you call the norms of the social norms of driving, social norms that self-driving vehicles, for example, do not have. They kind of they adhere to the letter of the law versus, the spirit of the law and stuff like that. So the question that I have is, can you kind of further explain this issue that you call uncertainty with self-driving vehicles and how or if that can be mitigated?
Yes, well, I think the uncertainty around self-driving cars, I really put it into two bins. One is that computer vision problem, the hallucinations that we're talking about. And this other bin is the unexpected actions by others. And, we see this from that example that you mentioned, that the self-driving cars, they don't defensively drive. They don't know anything. They don't have ideas. They don't have understandings. They're just responding to statistical predictions. So that is why trucks will do this back into a self-driving car at intersections, because the car doesn't understand that in our social construct of driving, we typically try to give delivery vehicles extra room, for example. And that is going to be, I think, even more problematic with if you have a self-driving truck that has a significant mass and is expecting that a car, will see a gap trying to pass on the highway and will take the gap and not understand that there'll be some kind of weird human behavior. And every trucker who's been out there has seen this, where a person sees a truck trying to do that and it's like, oh, no, you're not. And the car will speed up to try to get around the truck before that. Right. And again, remember, I come from a trucking family, so I have heard all the complaints over the dinner table. But that act alone, is it possible that if the car tries to jump in the gap, that the sensors could see it? It is possible, but the problem is that at some point, physics takes over. And even if you can think that you can avoid it, you're also relying on the other human to be able to respond and act accordingly. And that problem that I talked about before, where self-driving vehicles, trucks, cars, whatever, they can actuate faster and at greater extremes than humans can and might. So this is where if that car jumps into that gap, the truck might overreact or underactuate. And then, there's some kind of collision that turns into a multi-car collision. So, I think that the inability to understand human behavior, because AI doesn't know anything, doesn't understand anything, doesn't actually reason. I think this is where we're going to see when humans do strange things, that the trucks are going to have a really difficult time responding to what statisticians would call low probability behaviors, but behaviors that every trucker sees every day.
Sure. Isn't this pretty much like the problem for self-driving vehicle manufacturers, which is the being able to adapt to the human behaviors, to human interactions? Because it seems like, self-driving technology and companies have been around for quite a long time. Like, this isn't necessarily anything new. And it seems like, we have the jump from level 2 technology to level 4 and 5 technology. We're having a very difficult time making that leap. And it seems like the reason why is because there's like this gap in the ability to advance our technology to learn, to adapt to human behavior. What is it, in your opinion, that's preventing technology from making that leap, to making that advance? Like, are we just not there yet? Do we just not have the ability to make that leap?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question, because it is a question that applies to both self-driving cars, but also more broadly to generative AI. There's a lot about ChatGPT and whether or not we're all going to go into the matrix with artificial intelligence, super intelligence.
Right.
And I would tell you across the board, whether or not we're talking about generative AI or we're talking about computer vision and self-driving cars, there is a dangerous tendency for humans to mistake intelligence mimicry with intelligence itself. And so self-driving cars mimic intelligence because under very careful conditions, under, where we call the sweet spot of their operating envelope, where there's lots of light, nice crisp white lines on the road, well-behaved humans, the self-driving cars mimic intelligent vehicles. But as soon as something unusual happens, for example, any operations around police, ambulances, fire trucks, the rotating lights on the cars confuse all self-driving vehicles and cause wacky behaviors. And we do not have that fixed. Yeah. And similarly, if the same problem with human behavior in and around trucks, when humans start to have antics, kind of unusual and maybe a little unsafe driving behavior around trucks, the systems don't know anything. There is no intelligence there. There is no intelligence in any ChatGPT. Again, these are just statistical predicting machines that are always predicting to the average behavior.
Sure.
And unfortunately, on the roads, we see a lot of not average behavior. And I actually, would go so far to say is truckers, by the unique nature of what they're trying to do, I think they probably see a lot more antics than your average human driver because, they're so big and people are, they see them coming and then they start to change their driving behavior because of what they think the truck may or may not do.
Before I let you go, I just kind of want to talk about the next steps forward. I know your research was about the research gaps when it comes to self-driving technology, and it kind of seems like we're kind of a bit in a paradox here in that we don't want self-driving vehicles on public roadways because of their inability to respond to uncertainty and stuff like that. But in order for autonomous vehicles to improve on that, they would need more data in the vehicles, right? So more specifically, they would need real world data since simulations appear to be inadequate. So the question is, how do self-driving vehicles get that real world data without putting everyone in harm's way by being on the public roadways?
It's going to have to come from the states. While there is a federal government ruling in place for the standing general order, I really expect Musk to do away with that if he hasn't quietly already. We just haven't heard about it yet because he has been very bitter about the existence of this data set because it definitely shows how much problem Teslas are having. So if we're going to get the data that we need to make sure that these systems are making safe enough progress, it's going to have to come from the states. California's doing a great job of trying to manage this. Texas is doing not a good job. So, and they will regret this because the likely for trucking, the first death, and I would say deaths, because when a truck goes, it's going to be more than one person who dies.
Sure.
That will happen in Texas. There will be an outcry of the public in Texas, and then it will come to pass that the regulatory agencies were just giving the companies a free ride. So unfortunately, people's deaths are what are going to move this needle.
Well, yeah, and I've been saying this for a while, that all it's going to take is one fatal crash in this Texas experiment to set the autonomous vehicle industry backwards a few years, because the public outcry is going to be pretty severe. So so that's at the the government level. The last question I have for you is, what can these these manufacturers, these companies, what is it that they can do to ensure that their products are safer moving forward?
This is a tough conversation because academia has a lot of work we need to do, for example, to solve the hallucinations. The regulatory agencies need to gather the data because they need to gather the data across companies. So when you ask about what the companies do, this is a tricky conversation. So there's been a lot of companies who are teaming with various trucking companies, Kodiak, Aurora, whoever else is left, right? And so what I would tell those companies is you should do the data gathering and make sure that you're tracking it closely. I will tell you that companies who are teaming with the self-driving car companies don't want to gather this data because everyone is very clear that when that first death or sets of deaths happen, there's going to be a massive lawsuit. And this is part of the problem that's happening right now, is that people are willfully not gathering data because they recognize that they're going to have to turn over any analyses and discovery.
Yeah.
So for those companies who are kind of sitting on the sidelines, they're not teamed with a self-driving car company, what should they do? To be fair, I would just tell them, I'd take a wait and see approach. If you don't have a dog in this fight, I wouldn't recommend any company get a dog in this fight right now, because this could implode. I mean, we're still at a place where it is not clear whether or not this is actually going to be feasible. And this is one of those times where I tell people, sometimes it's better to be number 2 or 3 or 4, right? Sometimes you don't want to be number 1. That would be my advice. Kind of take a wait and see approach. I think that's why I do these kinds of podcasts, because I think it's great that you get the word out. I'm always happy to come give talks to other people. You should be asking me, other academics, especially if you guys have large conferences where everybody gets together to kind of share best practices. I think the whole industry needs to link arms. I understand that there's potential money to be made, but I also come from a trucking family. And so that's why I try so much to reach out to this crowd, because I understand what that means. And I don't think anybody's job is on the line here. It is possible, for example, that trucks could start doing cross-country routes that could substantially reduce pressure on drivers for drives that could be excruciating. But we're not anywhere close to being able to get rid of the human, especially for last mile delivery, these types of things where you really need a lot of skill. But even on the highways, when you see all of this unusual, unexpected behavior from humans. And so I think we need to proceed very cautiously. And the trucking industry needs to link arms and saying, look, it's not that we're open to new technology, but it's our butts on the line. And any massive self-driving car or truck accident is going to reflect negatively on the whole industry.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
I think there's a lot on the line.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like I said, we're about to find out here pretty soon in April once Aurora starts putting out their vehicles. But anyway, hey, I appreciate you taking the time and talking with me. I do appreciate your research that you're working on, kind of quantifying, I think, what most of us intuitively know, but it's that quantifying it that was really helpful to inform, decision makers. So I appreciate that. So thank you for joining me.
You're welcome. Anytime.
That was Landline Magazine's Tyson Fisher talking to University professor Missy Cummings about recent research into self-driving vehicles. For Landline Now, I'm Ashley Blackford. Stay tuned for more coming up.
At Truck Stop, we've built a better load board for carriers like you. Sign up today and access over 600,000 loads on the most trusted online load board. Learn why the best in the business rely on Truck Stop to make more money and start driving your profit today.
Capital Reman, the leader in remanufactured diesel engines and components, has partnered with OOIDA to offer exclusive member benefits. Visit capitalreman.com today to support America's transportation industry and take advantage of your benefits.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com, because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Welcome back to Landline Now. The trucking industry is changing rapidly with the introduction of electric vehicles from light commercial vans all the way up to Class 8 tractors. Today we're going to take a look at the way that's affecting the tire selection process along with performance expectations. And helping us do that today is Andy McCulloch of Michelin. Andy is the company's senior CES engineer for the West Coast, and he joins us on the line now. Andy, good to have you back.
Hi, Scott. Always a pleasure to be on the show. And thanks for bringing up a topic that really represents one of the most fundamental changes in the industry in a very long time.
Yeah, and thanks in advance for bringing some light to this topic, which we're going to do here over the next several minutes. Let's start with what we know here, and I guess perhaps more importantly, what we don't know when it comes to electric trucks and tires. Considering obviously that the electric truck drivetrain is such a different concept altogether, do we know a whole lot about how tires are going to perform there, or even if the current offerings are going to work on an electric truck? What do we know? What do we not know?
Well, Michelin's actually been involved in tire development for fully electric urban buses for a number of years. So, of course, the next logical step is fully electric commercial trucks. But the experience with the buses has taught us a few things over the years, which I'll share. But I also want to discuss the tire selection and the maintenance compared to a diesel equivalent. The other thing that's important is to determine where advancements in tire technology need to take us in order to really keep up with electric truck development.
Yeah, I mean, like most things in life, this is an ongoing process. But again, based on what we know, what are some key things you've learned about tires and electric vehicles, and obviously more specifically, for our purposes, tires and electric trucks?
Well, it turns out that one of the most important tire characteristics for fuel economy in conventional trucks or diesel trucks is also a huge contributor for extending the range of an electric truck, and that's rolling resistance. So we know that the rolling resistance of the tires can be responsible for as much as 33% of the fuel consumed in a standard ICE vehicle or a diesel truck. But this is even more critical on an electric vehicle because it greatly impacts the operating range of the vehicle. And given the current nature of charging time and infrastructure, the operating range can be a big concern for a fleet. The other factor to take into consideration is that these vehicles are actually heavier than a diesel truck due to the weight of the batteries. And this really impacts the load-carrying capability and limits of the vehicle. So we're already seeing regulation changes that allow for an increase in the gross vehicle weight limits for alternative fuel trucks by 2,000 pounds or so. And we're working to address the load-carrying capability of our tires as well. And this is really especially true on our steer axles, which are already close to their capacity on diesel trucks. But we can also expect a significantly faster wear rate on drive tires fitted on electric tractors and straight trucks, regardless of the tire brand.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I think I probably understand why that is, but you are the expert here, so I'll let you kind of explain why that is. But a faster wear rate, what's behind that specifically?
Well, it's really due to a number of things. As I mentioned before, the tread compounds that are designed to provide the best range are not necessarily going to be the best for wear, especially in the sort of applications that most electric trucks are currently employed in, which is very local, regional applications. But in addition to that, the drive configuration on a lot of electric trucks is a big factor as well. A lot of them are a 6x2 tractor or a 4x2 truck. And in these cases, all the torque is transferred to one drive axle instead of two, like on a 6x4 truck. So this can result in the tires wearing twice as fast. And while that's true for diesel trucks as well, it's certainly more of a factor with electric drivetrains due to the fact the electric trucks have no torque curve like a traditional ICE vehicle does, but rather they apply full torque on acceleration. Another factor is the torque value. So generally, the higher the amount of torque being applied, the faster the tires wear rate, right? And electric trucks have a tremendous amount of torque versus a diesel equivalent. Although electric truck manufacturers have been developing how quickly they ramp up the torque for pulling power, there's still a considerable amount of wear being experienced by the tires as a result of the drivetrain. And the other thing to consider is that the electric trucks have the ability to slow the vehicle down without using conventional friction brakes. Nearly all electric vehicles use what's called regenerative braking. which actually helps to put more charge back into the battery for extended range. But once again, that results in a lot of torque transfer of the tires, which can accelerate the wear and fatigue.
Yeah, and that all makes sense as you explain it there. I can tell you faster wear is not really going to be a selling point for anybody out there, but, we control the things we can control. So in this case, when we're talking about the rate of wear, what are some things that a driver can do to kind of mitigate that aspect of all of this? And I would assume it comes down to maintenance.
Exactly. Maintenance is a big part of it. So let's start with that. One of the maintenance items that really doesn't change between a diesel and an electric truck is air pressure. So you still need to match the pressure with the load that you're carrying according to the data tables for the tire manufacturer. Since we know there's an increase in axle weight and also higher gross vehicle weight, pressure maintenance is going to be key to preventing overload situations. Unfortunately, this may result in having two different sets of air pressure specifications, one for electric vehicles, one for diesels within the individual fleet. But whether it's diesel or electric, improper air pressure will have a negative impact on your range for electric drives, irregular wear, and casing fatigue.
Yeah. So as with any new technology or product line, there are obviously going to be challenges. I think we all understand that. And I suspect a lot of them, with regard to this, we don't even know quite yet what they are. But again, as I said earlier, we control what we can control. And in this case, we work with what we know. So when it comes to the successful adoption of electric trucks, what are some of the keys to getting that done, in your opinion?
Well, the tire manufacturer, we believe that doing our part to support the electric vehicle movement includes educating the consumer on selection and maintenance. And what works well on a diesel truck may not work so well on an electric truck. So I think we'll need a strong emphasis on training, since there'll be a learning curve for tire technicians, mechanics, and drivers within fleets. As for the industry itself, I think the current obstacles that need to be overcome are really range anxiety and charging time. These will eventually be overcome through technological advancements, as well as training of industry personnel and familiarization, that sort of thing. Initial capital costs are an immediate concern, the cost of the vehicles themselves as well. But there are a number of federal and state level programs in place to help mitigate these costs. And as the industry develops, the initial vehicle costs should come down and bring itself more in line with ICE vehicles and diesel-powered vehicles.
Again, this is all moving very fast right now, but if I can ask you to take out that crystal ball that I know you have right on your desk there, what does the future look like when it comes to tire design?
Well, there's no magic formula when it comes to this. The key is for tire engineers and designers to really try and ensure that one, we increase the load carrying capacity, especially for the steer position of the tires. And we might find this requires introducing totally new sizes and pressure tables in an effort to do that. We also want to reduce rolling resistance to help supplement the range of the electric vehicle. And we want to improve the wear characteristics, although this can be challenging since we often give up performances in one area to gain it in another. But finally, the compounds and the tread designs will have to be more versatile by straddling across conventional usage boundaries that currently exist. And that can be extremely challenging for engineers in the industry. But it's a challenge, I think, that we're up to and that we can overcome.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said, certainly an interesting and exciting time. We'll all be waiting to see where all of this ends up. But as far as this goes, we appreciate you coming on and talking about all this and giving us your insights and, giving us kind of a glimpse into the future as well. We appreciate it as always, Andy.
Thanks, Scott, and thanks for having me on the show.
Our thanks once again to Andy McCulloch of Michelin, and our thanks to you for tuning in. That's our show for today. We're back tomorrow with another, so we hope to see you then. Either way, take care and drive safe out there.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife.
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
Chrome.
And I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us!
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.